He was a great natural leader, even though he wasn't a producer or writer on the show. Ron Howard has been quiet about his time on The Andy Griffith Show, and who could blame him? When you grow up on one of TV's most beloved shows, every fan wants to know the whole story. But now, after years of keeping things quiet, Ron is finally talking about his relationship with Andy Griffith. Was Mayberry as perfect as it seemed? Are you ready for Ron's revelations? Andy Griffith and Ron Howard are two names that make you think of the small-town charm of The Andy Griffith Show, but their relationship wasn't just about fishing trips and life lessons in Mayberry. They had laughs and heartfelt moments on screen, but their relationship was complicated off-screen. For the first time, Ron Howard spills the beans on his time with Andy Griffith. There are secrets that Ron Howard is finally ready to share, and there have been rumors of problems between him and his son. Ron Howard was the famous director of Apollo 13 and A Beautiful Mind. Ron Howard was just a kid trying to make it in Hollywood. Born on March 1, 4954, in Duncan, Oklahoma, Ron seemed destined for the SP spotlight. When your parents are working actors, what else will you do? By the time Ron was 15 months old, he was already in a commercial. Most of us were still learning how to walk, but Ron was already nailing his first job. When Ron's family moved to Hollywood, his dad, Rance Howard, became his unofficial acting coach, and his parents even let him watch live TV productions while they coached him. Ron's early performances weren't just cute, they were polished. What does Ron have to say about his relationship with... If Andy Griffith stays, this story is about to get even more interesting. Ron Howard didn't just happen to end up in Hollywood. He pretty much grew up there. Imagine being 5 years old and getting your first movie role in The Journey 1959. Most kids that age are still learning how to tie their shoes, but Ron was already working with professionals. It wasn't until he was on Playhouse 90 that people realized he was pretty good. Critics praised his roles for having a... Ron, who probably still needed to be reminded to eat his vegetables, was already making waves in Hollywood by the time he tried out for The Andy Griffith Show in 1960. His fiery red hair may have caught the eye of a few casting directors at first, but his natural acting skills and interest in the craft sealed the deal. He got several callbacks early on because his hair made him stand out. He got the part of Opie Taylor when he was 6 years old. But what happened behind the scenes was just as important. Andy took him under his wing and taught him everything from comedic timing to why character motives matter. It wasn't just acting lessons, it was life lessons wrapped in sitcom charm. And then there was Ron's famous audition. The set of The Andy Griffith Show wasn't just where he worked, it was where he learned. While other kids were figuring out how to get along with their peers at recess, he was... How many kids can say they went to work every day and got life advice from Andy Griffith? Andy Griffith's story began in the small town of Mount Airy, North Carolina, which was the inspiration for Mayberry. He was born on June 1, 1926, and didn't exactly have a silver spoon in his mouth. Growing up during the Great Depression meant that he came from a poor family, but his parents were able to scrape together enough money to buy him an old... Andy wanted to be a music teacher at first, but life had other ideas. His quick wit and ability to tell stories got him gigs performing in nightclubs. His big break came when he wrote a hilarious monologue about football and what it was. It went viral before it was even a thing, and over 800,000 copies were sold, showing that a good laugh can go a long way. That unexpected hit launched Andy into the entertainment world, where his down-to-earth charm and humility became his trademark. Andy wasn't just a co-star on young Ron Howard Opie. He also had a way of making things relatable by adding a story or two to make his point. Ron later said that Andy's advice had helped him in both his personal and professional life. The two stayed close after the show ended, with Ron often calling Andy for advice. It's safe to say that Andy wasn't just a TV legend. He was the kind of mentor you'd want. Wise, approachable, and with just the right amount of charm, too. To keep things lighthearted, Andy Griffith gave Ron Howard a signed guitar as a sign of their friendship. Ron still treasures this gift. Based on mutual respect, their relationship is one of the best examples of a mentor-mentee relationship in Hollywood. The Andy Griffith Show, which premiered in 1960 and became a classic for showing small-town life and timeless values, was consistently one of the most popular shows on TV during its 8 seasons. Griffith's Sheriff Taylor was kind and smart, and Ron Howard's Opie was innocent and interested. Together, they made a touching father-son dynamic. Behind the scenes, the cast and crew created a warm, family-like atmosphere that added to the show's feel-good mood. Did you know that the show's iconic whistling theme song, Fishing Hole, is one of the most recognizable TV songs of all time? The show made Andy Griffith a TV legend, and it also made Ron Howard a star. Howard's career laid the groundwork for his future fame. Moving from a beloved childhood role to adulthood is never easy, but Ron Howard handled it with remarkable grace. When the Andy Griffith Show ended, things felt different. It wasn't just another season finale, it was the end of an era. Andy Griffith started to speak, and all of a sudden he started to cry. He wasn't just a few tears, he was sobbing. It wasn't just about. He realized that the show had been more than just a job. It had been a big part of his life. Now that it was all over, he wasn't sure what life would be like without those familiar faces and the comforting routine. But looking back, it wasn't just the show that had shaped his childhood. It was also how his dad had turned an unexpected turn of events into something even bigger. His dad had come to California hoping to finally fulfill a dream. His big break didn't come for him. It came for his little boy. That turn of events made his dad an acting coach, teaching him in a way that only a parent could. It wasn't your typical acting class. His dad broke down the craft in a way that a little kid could understand. Even when he was 4 or 5, he was learning the basics of Stanislas Lem, but in a simpler way. For example, he would take a scene like Opie trying to avoid his homework and make it into a scene about Opie trying to avoid his homework, and break it down, explaining the feelings behind the lines. For example, Opie doesn't want to do his homework, but his dad wants him to. He's just trying to get out of it. His dad would help him by breaking down scenes and showing him the different sides of the character in a way that was easy for a child to understand. And if Opie was getting away with something, his dad would quickly remind him that it was just TV and not real life, so don't try it at home. But his dad wasn't just an acting coach. He had this rare gift. He worked with famous people like Andy Griffith, Don Knotts, Aaron Rubin, and Sheldon Leonard. But even with all of these big names, his dad would raise his hand and say, "Hold up. I don't think this is working. Opie's coming across as too bratty. Instead of cheap laughs, let's make their relationship more honest." What was crazy was that Andy and Sheldon listened to him and agreed to change the decision to make Opie's relationship more honest. More real with his dad changed the game for the show. Fast forward to the last few days of filming. He was 14 years old, and the wrap party was unlike anything he had ever been to before. The show was still #1, but Andy Griffith was ready to move on, and he was okay with it. He had other interests, like sports directing and going back to school. But when the last day of filming came, it hit him like a punch in the gut at the party. He took the mic, and tears started streaming. It wasn't just a show. When that chapter of his life ended, he didn't fully realize how much he'd miss it until it was over. He was saying goodbye to people who had become family to him and who had shaped so much of who he was. It hurt. Almost 20 years later, they brought the show back for a reunion movie. By that time, he had moved on, was directing, and had even quit Happy Days. But Andy asked him to come back and play Opie again, and he did. Reminded that the wonderful people he had worked with back then were exactly as he remembered them. The childhood memories were still fresh in his mind, and the connection between them was as strong as ever. It felt like no time had passed at all. Moving on, Ron Howard wasn't happy just riding the Opie Taylor wave forever. He jumped into other roles, like his breakout role in George Lucas's American Graffiti, 1973. The movie's success made it clear that Ron wasn't just that kid from Mayberry anymore. Eager to learn the ins and outs of film and determined to shed the child star label, Ron started directing with Grand Theft Auto 1977, not the video game. It was a crazy, low-bunch movie produced by Roger Corman, who was known for making magic on a shopping budget. Then came the big hits like Splash 1984, a romantic comedy about a mermaid that made us all believe in love and sea creatures, and Cocoon 1985, a heartwarming sci-fi story about a. Even though Ron didn't age well, these hits made him famous as a director and showed that reinvention is not only possible in Hollywood, it's necessary. He traded his small-town charm for big-screen brilliance, and we're all the better for it. In 1975, Ron Howard married Cheryl Ally, and against all odds, they're still going strong almost 50 years later. In an industry where marriages can last as long as a movie, Ron and Cheryl have been the exception. The writer Cheryl became his rock and helped him get through the wild ride of the entertainment business, which, let's face it, isn't fun. Together, they built a close-knit family that includes Bryce Dallas Howard, who is now a famous actress and filmmaker. The Howards have always kept their feet on the ground, even when the red carpets came out. Ron credits Cheryl's unwavering support for his career success, and he's often said that being a dad has changed him. This family is close, they work together, go to red carpet events together, and probably have the most interesting group texts ever. If anyone wants proof that love can last in Hollywood, Ron and Cheryl's marriage is it. Meanwhile, Andy Griffith wasn't done impressing people after Mayberry. He played a sharp but folksy lawyer in Matlock, showing that Southern charm and a sharp suit will always be in style. People loved him all over again, and the show became a hit. And it wasn't over for Andy. He also released country and gospel albums that were influenced by his upbringing in the South. But even with all of these accomplishments, Andy always said that his time on Mayberry was the best part of his career, and he stayed close to his co-stars, especially Ron Howard, whom he lovingly called his son in spirit. In his later years, Andy juggled his work and personal life like a pro, making sure that he would be remembered as one of America's most beloved entertainers. Ron Howard left Mayberry and went straight to Milwaukee in the 1950s, or at least the sitcom version of Milwaukee, when Happy Days came out on TV in 1974. Ron played Richie Cunningham, the clean-cut kid everyone wanted as a best friend. The show was a smash hit, giving the world catchphrases, leather jackets, and Fonzie the coolest mechanic ever. Fans couldn't get enough of Richie, but Ron had bigger plans, so he spent his free time. Happy Days wasn't just about acting for Andy Griffith, it was the start of a career in filmmaking that would define him. Andy Griffith wasn't just the lovable sheriff of Mayberry, he was also a mentor who took his role as a guide seriously, even when the cameras stopped rolling. Andy wasn't the type to clock out when the show was over. He continued to inspire young Ron Howard with bits of advice. Andy and Ron stayed close after the Andy Griffith Show ended, often catching up over quiet chats or family hangouts. Andy didn't just support Ron's dreams of becoming a director, he told him that breaking into Hollywood was like fishing. It took patience, hard work, and maybe a little luck. Ron took Andy's advice to heart, and his directing career got off to a great start with the critically acclaimed whimsical Romance. The comedy about a mermaid falling in love with Tom Hanks was a surprise hit in 1984. Both audiences and critics loved it, and it seemed like everyone was okay with suspending their disbelief about a fisherwoman. After that, Ron kept the hits coming with Cocoon in 1985, a movie about getting older and, strangely enough, aliens. Andy Griffith, the man behind the scenes, was more quiet than his TV persona, which was friendly and chatty. Andy loved music and didn't like telling the press about his life. People who knew him as Ron said he had a wicked sense of humor, great manners, and strong morals. When he wasn't giving life advice, you could find him strumming his guitar or singing gospel songs. His upbringing in a small town in North Carolina shaped him, and he never let fame change who he was. Ron often said that Andy's humility and work ethic shaped his life. Between teaching life lessons and playing the guitar, Andy Griffith may have been the coolest mentor in the world. He was humble and thoughtful, which made him a hit with everyone he knew. That same quality rubbed off on Ron Howard, who went on to become one of Hollywood's most respected directors. Take Apollo 131995, for example. If you like edge your seed suspense and a bit of NASA drama, this movie is for you. Ron turned a failed space mission into a nail-biting spectacle. The movie got 9 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture. Then there's A Beautiful Mind, 2001, which looked at the messy brilliance of mental illness. It not only won awards, but it also gave Ron his first Oscars for Best Director and Best Picture. It's like the guy knows how to tell huge human stories. Andy Griffith didn't have an easy life in his later years. He had to deal with Andy had serious health problems like a heart attack and Guillain-Barré syndrome, a rare condition that affects your nervous system. But Andy didn't let that stop him. He kept doing what he loved, like his entertainment career and staying in touch with his fans. He often talked about how his love of storytelling and work kept him going even when things got tough. Andy's grit not only impressed his fans, but also people like Ron Howard, who looked up to him. Andy's relentless spirit is said to have helped him recover from a major heart attack faster than anyone expected in the 1980s. And even though Guillain-Barré syndrome left him temporarily unable to walk, he was still giving talks and making appearances. Andy was the best mentor who could get you pumped up. He'd look at Ron and tell him how proud he was of the man and filmmaker he'd become, and Ron would tell Andy the same thing. Andy Griffith was a good friend and career advisor, and Ron thanked him for everything. Who wouldn't want Andy Griffith in their corner? The man probably made you feel like you could take on the world with just a smile and a fishing pole. For Ron, these moments weren't just touching, they were bittersweet. Andy wasn't just a co-star. He was like that wise uncle who always knew what to say. Their last meetings were full of that unspoken bond. Ron still holds on to Andy's last words like an heirloom, but thankfully without the worry of, what if I lose this? When looking at their friendship, they left an unbreakable mark on TV history. Their real-life bond added something special to the Andy Griffith Show. Fans weren't just watching Sheriff Taylor and Opie, they were watching two people who genuinely cared about each other. That father-son relationship dynamic, it set the standard for a good family. The warmth, respect, and communication are so good that they would make a family therapist proud. And the magic hasn't worn off yet. Ron hasn't let Andy's memory fade either. He's the one who casually talks about Andy in interviews as if he were reminiscing over coffee. He credits Andy's success in Hollywood to the values he taught him, like respect, kindness, and keeping calm under pressure. As a director, Ron kept Andy's spirit alive on the sets of No Diva. Drama is just a polite VI where everyone works together like family. That's the kind of leadership Andy would have liked, and it keeps his memory alive in every movie Ron makes.